I need a pen. Good morning to all our viewers out there this morning, to our Sunday morning press conference. All the media who's in attendance this morning, and all our supporters and well-wishers. And I want to say a special good morning to many of our members of Parliament and senators who are viewing at this point in time. This morning, I am the Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre, also the Chief Whip in Parliament, and I'm joined today in this press conference with my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Faizabad, Dr. Lakram Budo, who also shadows the Ministry of Health. Now, before I turn you over and I ask Dr. Budo to join me, I just want to set the tone here for our press conference today. This morning, as you know, we had a fiasco, as I would say, a terrible week in our country this week. And today is one of the daily newspapers, starts off with their front page, says, by the Prime Minister, just one bad day. And I want to put that in context, and I want to let the Prime Minister know that he's not getting away so easy, being that in his press conference yesterday, he came and he apologized and he felt everything will be okay by that apology. I want to let him know that the opposition and the country will not let him get away with that apology. Now, what is a one bad day? One bad day in normal people's lives, for example, is when you're in your car and you get a flat tire and you change that tire and you get another tire, flat tire. I would say that's a bad day you're having. If you're in your home and you have plumbing issues, I would consider that being a bad day. Or if your better half is angry with you, I would consider that's a bad day you're having. But what we had and witnessed on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week could never be called a bad day in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. What we witnessed was a fiasco. Words that experimenting on the elderly. That's what we witnessed this week. So it could never be that the Prime Minister could come and apologize and tell this country he was having a bad day on Wednesday of this week. So with those few words, and I will come back later on in my presentation, so I will pass you over to Dr. Budo, who will give us a presentation on the Ministry of Health. Thank you, Dr. Budo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre, the Chief Whip in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome again to all those who are viewing and listening, and a special welcome to the members of the media, and I thank you for joining us this morning. This morning, we are here to raise some issues regarding the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially with the events that occurred in their vaccination rollout plan this past week. A week that started with hope for many citizens last Saturday, when the Honorable Prime Minister offered the carrot of hope and relief with the promise of large numbers of vaccines on the way, but one that ended sadly with the stick of anger and despair on Friday, when citizens realized that this government was in no position to do mass vaccinations safely or competently. Unfortunately, Trinidad and Tobago experienced a bizarre week this past week in our battle against COVID-19. In addition to 79 deaths too many and 2,012 new COVID cases in the past 7 days, we had some serious additional blunders by this government which could possibly put many more lives at risk. and I pray and trust that this doesn't happen to be so. The government has had a long time, almost 1 year, to prepare for this vaccine rollout. Yet, in trying to explain the government's misstep in the attempt to roll out mass vaccination last week, the Prime Minister had this to say, and I quote from yesterday's press conference. This is what the Prime Minister had to say. "We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination, and therefore that experiment of trying to do too much with too little could only have failed, and it has failed." Citizens, I just want to repeat this. These are the Prime Minister's words. "We are in no position to carry on mass vaccination, and therefore that experiment of trying to do too much with too little could only have failed, and it has failed." This speaks volumes for how this government has been operating in this COVID-19 crisis. The Prime Minister admitted yesterday at his press conference that they were experimenting on us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Every time we in the opposition asked them, whether inside or outside of the Parliament, about the preparation, we were told that they had everything under control. Well, last week showed clearly that this was not the case. You can't have 1 year to plan and still have disaster after disaster and then come to the population and apologize. As my colleague Dr. Lee mentioned, an apology is simply not enough. It is simply unacceptable. The citizens deserve better than that, especially when we have people dying in double digits every single day. It is simply unacceptable and an insult to the population to tell us that we have one of the best vaccine programs in the region, if not in the world. This is what I was hearing at yesterday's press conference. I don't think there is any right-thinking citizen that believes that we have a good vaccination program, and that was crystal clear this week. Citizens woke up on Wednesday morning to long lines around every vaccination center in this country. It was heart-wrenching to see hundreds of our elderly people braving whatever conditions in the hope of getting the vaccine that the government promised them. It is baffling to comprehend the government's thoughts or strategy, especially when they knew exactly how many vaccines they had at the moment, very few as it turned out to be. The government, in their wisdom or lack thereof, invited all and sundry to go for a vaccine and then expressed dismay and shock when the population called their bluff. Some have actually termed this initiative last Wednesday as a bluff and blame strategy. Did they bluff the population and then, try to blame the population for turning out? We cannot blame citizens for lining up to get a vaccine when there are so many deaths from COVID-19 on a daily basis and so few vaccines available. The high number of deaths in this country has thrown vaccine hesitancy out the window a long time ago. But as is not unusual at this government, they were the last to know. I was shocked and surprised to hear the Honorable Minister of Health, saying that they thought that because of the vaccine hesitancy issues, that they didn't think the population would turn up in such large numbers. Utter nonsense. Some of these persons may have spent their last dollar in a taxi to get there, so let us not chastise them for lining up from the wee hours of the morning. This faux pas by the government didn't just affect citizens who wanted to get a vaccine, but also stressed the healthcare workers at the clinics as well, because many of them had to conduct previously scheduled outpatient clinics in the middle of this chaos, and this, of course, increased in numbers that were present at the health centers. In a further bizarre act, on that very same morning, the Minister of Health, at a media conference, whilst proffering an apology, went on to roll on another shocking plan for Thursday. So while this disaster is unfolding on Wednesday morning, here is the Minister of Health at his media press conference, rolling out another plan, which I wondered whether it was a really well-thought-out plan, and of course the events on Thursday and Friday would have shown that it wasn't. So the plan was that they will now invite citizens over 60 with surnames A to E to come out on Thursday, but forgetting to mention that only 50 vaccines would be available at each health center. To no one's surprise, except perhaps the government, another disaster occurred on Thursday. The second misstep further frustrated an already anxious and angry population, leading to calls by many, including the Honorable Prime Minister, including the Honorable Leader of the Opposition for the resignation or the firing of the Minister of Health, something we are yet to see. The government should borrow some planning and execution skills from the private sector, because they had a very successful rollout last weekend at the Diwali Nagar site, where over 7,000 vaccines were administered in one day with no hiccups. The TTMA and the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago showed how big events like these need to be managed and the importance of involving other sectors in the vaccination rollout. This leads me to another faux pas by this government. Again, blunder after blunder. After 1 year of planning for this vaccine rollout, the Ministry of Health called in dentists and other volunteers, including vets and EMTs, to a vaccination training program. This training program took place from May 27th to June 8th, I'm reliably informed. And then these volunteers were authorized to go out in the field to assist in the vaccination process. Lo and behold, on last Friday, a letter was sent out indicating to these volunteers that they were no longer able to perform their duties. And the issues were that they were not indemnified by the Ministry of Health. So imagine how this government operates, training and assigning these volunteers to work on the field without the proper legislative amendment to protect the state and citizens. Thankfully, I believe that this has been rectified, and these outstanding citizens can continue with their volunteering. I want to thank them for their service to the country. So, members of the media, if you're in public, what is the way forward? We are told that 234,000 vaccines have been received since the initial gift from the Barbados government in February 2021, a far cry from the vaccines required to immunize 700,000 of the population. We are told that 150,000 have received their first dose, and a mere 9,800 are now fully vaccinated. The newest plan is to now administer 20,000 vaccines to those over 65 from Wednesday of this coming week. I am concerned. I would like the government to explain this vaccination plan to the population. And I don't mean by coming every weekend and giving instructions on the television. We keep talking about digital transformation, yet we are unable to have some sort of online system in place to facilitate these appointments. I would like to ask the government, why is it so difficult to have that in place? If they need help, there are many qualified persons in this field who can assist with this. If they want, we in the UNC are always ready, willing, and able to assist. I asked this morning, and perhaps this is just a moot point, what will happen if our luck turns around and we receive a large shipment of vaccines? Would chaos ensue again? The government has to tell us and give us the assurance that they have a proper plan in place. Another issue I would like to raise this morning is that of the reporting of COVID-19 deaths and the manner in which it is reported. Surely the government is gathering data on these untimely and unfortunate deaths. The statistics are worrisome. At April 30th this year, the total number of deaths stood at 169, but May unfortunately saw 336 additional deaths, and at the last reporting yesterday in June, we've had 149 as of yesterday. I would like to ask them that since we are all in this together, to share relevant and pertinent clinical information without compromising patient confidentiality, so as to better inform the population of the circumstances under which deaths are most likely to occur. We are given bare statistics about gender and age groupings, but we are not told whether these deaths are occurring at the home or in hospitals, and if in the hospitals, whether it is in the ICU, the HDU, or the wards, or whilst waiting in COVID tents. I call upon the government to translate this mortality data into information, into useful information, and without compromising patient confidentiality, share this with the population. In the absence of vaccines, enable the population with any tools, any other tools to protect themselves in this war. The population needs the assurance that if they are admitted to a facility, that the very best care will be provided to them. But more than that, there seems to be a number of sudden deaths occurring at home in patients young and old without the warning of clinical symptoms and signs. The story reported in the news of the sudden death of a 20-year-old young man is heart-wrenching, and my deepest condolences go to his parents and loved ones, as indeed to the loved ones of the other 656 persons who would have succumbed to COVID-19. It may be that these cases are related to the issue of silent hypoxia. And this is an issue where your oxygen saturation levels can drop quietly, especially in young, otherwise healthy persons without developing signs and symptoms. So I am asking the government to give the citizens some more information so that they can be more aware of their own situations and protect themselves further. In this regard, I want to suggest that it might be useful for citizens or households to acquire, if they can, what is called a pulse oximeter. It's a simple device where they can measure their own blood oxygen levels. It doesn't require any medical training. It's easy to use. It's applied to the finger. And if the oxygen saturation levels drop to under 90, it is a sign, even without symptoms, that you should seek medical attention, perhaps call for an ambulance. The normal readings should be 95% and above. So in addition to the 3 W's, and again I want to endorse wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your distance, I would also recommend the wearing of a face shield to protect your eyes, since the WHO has now admitted that this virus can be spread by droplets in the air, so it is therefore airborne. In this regard, proper ventilation in closed spaces is also a must, both at home and in the workplace. I just want to mention a little bit about the vaccinated persons and the lack of proper education from the Ministry of Health. It has not been emphasized enough that those who receive the vaccines are still at risk for at least 14 days and still need to take the usual precautions. This is very important. I would also want to suggest that when you receive your vaccine, there seems to be an absence of any education at the centers, and perhaps a leaflet could be rolled out or given to those citizens when they receive their vaccination. As I close, I again want to ask the government to engage all stakeholders in this battle. We are all in this together, and all resources must be tapped. NGOs, businesses, and other professional organizations, local government representatives, and of course, members of parliament. The leader of the opposition, together with all of us on this side, remain willing, ready, and able to assist in national effort in whatever way necessary. Failure for Trinidad and Tobago is not an option in this war against COVID-19. May God continue to bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Budo, for bringing some clarity and sanity to what happened and what we witnessed this week and what happened in that press conference yesterday. Now, before I get into my presentation, I would like to just elaborate further on the debacle of this week to bring some clarity and the opposition voice to what we witnessed this week. Yesterday, in the press conference held by the Prime Minister, we thought, and I think the country was looking for, that the Prime Minister would have come to this country and said that he accepted the resignation of the Minister of Health, Terence Dayal Singh. That did not happen. What we heard was that the Prime Minister is telling this country, after witnessing the travesty of over the last few days, that he has full confidence in the Minister of Health. And the Prime Minister, in that press conference, said he is taking full blame for what happened over the last few days. And it was just a bad day that the country witnessed on Wednesday past week. Now, as I said in my opening remarks, what is a bad day? And really and truly, I want to ask the Prime Minister and his government, and the population is asking also, along with the opposition, how many more bad days would we witness by this government going forward in this pandemic? Because we would have been told last year that they don't need any stakeholders' help, whether it is the opposition, whether it is the business sector, whether it is the normal man on the street. They don't want any advice from these stakeholders because they have everything in control. And what we have witnessed this week, and is something that the opposition and the leader of the opposition has always been telling the population, they do not know what they are doing. This government, they don't have a plan. They are operating on VAPs and Vike. And we saw that on Wednesday. Now, let me bring back what happened on Wednesday. Wednesday, in our view, was a public relations stunt by this government, and it failed miserably. They literally put the lives of our elderly at risk on Wednesday. Because you cannot tell this country yesterday that you were experimenting on a mass vaccination thing. I say thing because it really was a thing. Because you have limited, as Dr. Bodo would have said, you have limited vaccines, and you try to do a mass vaccination on the population on Wednesday. So the group that you call on, and they advertised it a few days before Wednesday last, in all the different regional health authorities, so that when you look at the advertisement that they put out, they said, according to the leader of the opposition, literally, come one, come all, and get your vaccine. So they said they were going to vaccinate 60 and over, and under 60 individuals with comorbidities. That is the thousands of people that they have targeted in that advertisement to come on Wednesday last is thousands of people. Thousands throughout your, I think it's 37 health centers, Dr. Budo? 36 health centers. You are telling individuals, come one, come all. In our view, that was always destined to fail. And the government would have known that. And you have to ask the question, why did they do it? And that is what the population has to keep asking this government and the Prime Minister. Why did they do that fiasco on Wednesday? Because when it started to become a disaster, because you're calling everyone to come to the health centers, and individuals, elderly, left their home just after the curfew at 5 a.m., travel to their particular health centers in their area to line up, people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and I will come to an individual I saw on the television on Friday who was 94 years old. And you're telling them, come one, come all, to get a vaccine. Now, so it wasn't about vaccine hesitance. It is that what has been happening in this country and the panic that this government has been putting on this population, they have made them fearful of their lives, and that is why on Wednesday, when you said, come one, come all, they came out in their thousands. And if you look at the videos of the different health centers, you would have seen it was like a Juve morning band in these different health centers. Hundreds and literally thousands of people lining the street to line up for a vaccine on Wednesday. When the Minister of Health and his other cabinet colleagues who were responsible for this fiasco realized it was failing, they abandoned it in midstream, and I think the Minister of Health came on a live press conference to apologize for that fiasco. Now, he apologized, and what he should have done was to suspend the entire vaccination process at that point in time. But he came with another scenario that Thursday and Friday they would do it alphabetically starting from A to E. Now that is more madness, more incompetence by the Minister of Health, because you still don't have the vaccines in this country to vaccinate the numbers that you are calling people to come and get your vaccine. So Wednesday was a bad day. That wasn't bad enough. You created another bad day on Thursday and on Friday. And on Thursday and Friday, you're only giving out 50 jabs, 50 vaccines per health center. And you have the elderly lining up again on Thursday and Friday to try and get a vaccine. I think on Friday night on one of the television stations, I think it was TV6, they interviewed a 94-year-old gentleman who came literally on the break of dawn right after curfew to line up for that vaccine. And he still wasn't able to get it 94 years old. And he had to walk back home. And he said he's fed up. He doesn't really care because he wouldn't come back again, because he can't put himself through that ordeal, not knowing would he get a vaccine. Now, that is merciless by this Minister of Health. That is callousness shown by this government to our elderly who have given so much to this country. And we have to ask the question, why did they perpetrate that fiasco on our elderly this week? And we must keep asking that question. We should not allow them and feel it is justified that the Prime Minister could come on a press conference yesterday on Saturday, literally 4 days or 3 days after the fiasco, to apologize. One would have thought that the Prime Minister, if he's taken responsibility, would have apologized to this country and to the elderly since Wednesday, when that PR stunt by his government failed and was failing. But they continued with the debacle for the rest of the week. And what did we see yesterday? Yesterday at that press conference, it was a hopeless press conference by the Prime Minister, because the Saturday before, when he held the press conference, when he first came and said that he is further shutting down the country and the curfew would start at 7 p.m. from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think last week, the following weekend, was the first Sunday that they were going to effect the curfew at 7 p.m. And he gave so much hope to the country at that press conference, another political PR stunt, right? That the country would have been opening up in maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And people were hopeful in this country. The business chambers felt that the Prime Ministers are finally taking some kind of guidance or advice from them. And then we witness the debacle and the fiasco this week. I want to say to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health, because really and truly the Minister of Health should on his own terminate himself. On his own, if he has any credibility or consciousness for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, he should offer his resignation forthwith and resign as Minister of Health of this country and go on the backbench. Go on the backbench of government, because he has failed. He has failed because for the last 16, 15 months since this pandemic has started, the Minister of Health keeps changing his tune how we operate in this pandemic. Every month is a different story with the Minister of Health. And I want to refer back to mass vaccination. I asked a question in Parliament on Wednesday, the same Wednesday that the government was having a bad day. The same Wednesday, I asked the Minister of Health, what about the 1.5 million vaccines, doses of vaccines that he said, his government said, his Minister of Finance said on May the 11th, that before coming to this press conference, and I quote, this is the Minister on May the 11th, before coming to his press conference on that day, he touched base with the Minister of Health, and he is sure that the Minister of Health placed an order for 1.5 million Sinopharm vaccines from the Chinese government. Now, if we had 1.5 million doses of vaccines to roll out to this country, what we would have witnessed on Wednesday would not have happened. So when you hear the word experiment, maybe in the government's mind, they were experimenting on how to do a mass vaccination at the expense of the elderly. They were trying a thing on Wednesday, and they try a thing on Thursday by alphabetical names. They try a thing on Friday. It failed. So they have now temporarily suspended that thing, because at the same time they were doing the mass vaccination, they were also rolling out the second dose of vaccines to the population. And the population has to ask this government, with all that you are trying to do, according to the Prime Minister, too much, what was the quote, Dr. Bodo? Too much with too little. Now, the Prime Minister is an experienced politician. He always tells the opposition when we don't know what we're talking about. They know. They know it. So wouldn't you have thought that the Prime Minister, with all his experience and all of his cabinet colleagues' experience, you would have thought that they would have never tried that thing. They would have never experimented on the population when literally you have no vaccines, but you're calling for a mass vaccination. And the population and the media should not fall for that apology issued by the Prime Minister yesterday. I would have thought when he issued that apology, right after he would have said he's calling for fresh elections. I thought I think that is what the population was hoping. After he apologized to the elderly, he would have called for fresh elections and prorogue Parliament, because that is required by these bad days that this country will be witnessing under this PNM government. So I move on. So I talked about the mass vaccination. I want to talk about, yesterday I read about the Minister of Finance is issuing 41,000 face masks, 1,000 pieces per member of Parliament. So we have 41 members of Parliament, so it's 41,000 face masks. 16 months later, the Minister of Finance feels it is important to issue 1,000 pieces of face cloth masks to each member of Parliament. In the pandemic that we are, I come into this press conference, I passed, even the homeless on the street have face masks. All of us have face masks in this country. Some of us have 20, some of us have boxes of face masks. What the people are crying out for today is the Minister of Finance to tell this population when the salary grant will be given and issued to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what the Minister of Finance should be talking about. When, because I asked a question again 2 weeks ago to the Minister of Finance, when would these salary grants start rolling out? And he said within 3 to 4 weeks. Now we are suffering, the country is suffering, and the Minister of Finance feels it's important to issue 41,000 face cloth masks to the population via the members of Parliament. Now, I think the Minister of Finance is having a bad day then, because he's taking good money, because we passed the issue of face masks. We saw last year where the Minister of Health said he could take all kind of jerseys and make face masks. So face masks today in our country is not an issue. The issue for our country right now is survival. It's survival of the population. It's survival of our small and medium businesses. It is about survival of the economy. It is about survival of trying to get our families who are out there still back home. That is what it is today, not 41,000 cloth face masks. And we'll ask who's getting that contract at another time. We want to hear today when the construction industry will be reopened. We thought, and I think the construction industry workers thought that yesterday the Prime Minister would have said that the construction workers can return back to work, because initially the Minister of Finance said the construction workers would not be entitled to file or get the salary grant. And now yesterday we heard from the Prime Minister that he'll be having discussions with the Minister of Finance to see how they can assist construction workers. Now we all know construction workers in our countries is our backbone. That is the economy. It drives the economy. Construction drives the economy. And they have been shut down for weeks now. Just like small and medium businesses are dying off on an hourly rate or a daily rate. Workers are being sent home because they have been sent home for the last 7 weeks or more since last year. I thought that is what the Prime Minister would have been talking about yesterday. We also want to, I want to just add a little bit on Dayal Singh. Everything Dayal Singh has touched has failed. And Dayal Singh had 16 months preparing under his watch the COVID-19 situation that this country is witnessing. And every month he brags and he boasts about the effective and the good work he's doing and his government is doing. And when they started to roll out the vaccines, you had enough time to prepare a proper rollout plan. You had enough time to put your hotline in place with proper staffing. You remember that hotline, Dr. Bodo? That has failed miserably. You had months and months to prepare because you knew vaccination was going to happen in our country. Why wait for the last 99 hour to do this? Your hotline failed. Your WhatsApp messaging failed. Your walk-in was a fiasco for vaccinations. Your online failed to even get off the ground. Well, we have seen countries in our own region like Guyana doing drive-through vaccination. We have not even have a proper hotline effective. I shudder to think what would happen if they start to do a drive-through to get vaccination. I saw in a video they were doing it in somewhere in Chagaramas. I don't know if that's another experimental situation. They're trying a thing down there. But they had more than enough time to get an effective vaccination program in place, whether it is your hotline, whether it is your online, whether it is your WhatsApp, and it all failed under who? Terrence Dayal Singh. So Terrence Dayal Singh, and I will say it constantly, has to resign. Yesterday I listened to the press conference because I listened not to get my weekly buff, but I was hoping that things would have happened. I thought, really and truly, the Prime Minister coming and say he's calling for a fresh mandate and elections will be due. That's what I was hoping for when I listened to that press conference. So I listened to the CMO yesterday. Now, I'm not attacking the CMO because I think the CMO has done a very good job. Because you remember, in March sometime, he said he had given advice before the spike that we are witnessing in the last few weeks. He had given advice to someone in the government about in March when he did his analysis. He could have predicted, or the numbers were there, that we would be witnessing a spike. And nobody took him on. And I am sure what we witnessed on Wednesday could never have been with the blessing of that chief medical officer. He's brighter than that. He's more in tune with what is happening in the COVID-19 situation. I think he cares about the people. That's why he's a medical doctor. And maybe if they stop doing the political public relations stunt this government is doing and really listen to that CMO, we might be in a better place than we are today. So I just want to put that on the table, and I ask the CMO, do not be fooled by this government. This country likes to jump on our opposition leader and saying that some of our comments or some of our releases are reckless and insightful. That is so far from the truth. What we have been doing over the last 12 to 16 months has been calling out the shortcomings of this government. Everything the opposition leader has said in her releases has come to pass. Now, because this government just wants to do it their way. And we as an opposition, we are very patriotic. The opposition leader is one of the true patriotics of this country. Individuals. She cares about the people. If you go back to her policies between 2010 to 20, it's all about caring about the people. So when we call out the shortcomings and the bad days of this government, we have a right to do that. And we will not rubber stamp the stupidity that this government is doing on the population. We would not do that. They are the ones who have been reckless and callous of this week. They have shown no concern for the elderly and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because on Wednesday, what happened, what we witnessed on Wednesday, it could have been my mother, it could have been your mother, it could have been your elderly aunt, it could have been your grandparents out there since 5 o'clock in the morning or after, lining up, hoping to get a vaccine. That is callousness and recklessness by this government. And you know what is this week? Not a word from the business chamber. Not a word from the business chamber about what we witnessed in this past few days. Prime Minister, and what we witnessed last night is some new guidelines that came out. So they are trying to appease certain parts of the population. So they have now asked about hardware stores can open. I think the regulation is out there Monday to Wednesday. Monday to Wednesday, here is one, Monday to Wednesday. They close on Thursday, they open Friday and Saturday. It reminds me of my grandfather long ago used to have a shop. And in those days, Thursdays used to close up the shop on a Thursday half day, because that was part of the regulations and the legislation at that point in time. And that is what we have gone back to with hardware stores. Bookstores are now allowed to open Monday to Friday. Thank God. I mean, for the children and the people to be able to access supplies and books and so forth. Now, bookstores, they have a lot of bookstores in malls. A lot of bookstores are in malls. Now, the first part of the public health regulations, this government back in the ending of April, shut down malls. They shut down all malls. And these malls, there are two large malls that are managed and owned technically by this government, Trinity Mall and Long Circular Mall. They have been shut down like all the other malls in this country since the ending of April, initially from the 1st of May. And the landlords are calling for their rent. Now, all these malls have small and medium, small businesses. Employees who work in those malls, in those shops, in the stores in those malls, have been home unemployed, not earning an income. They would have applied for the salary relief grant, whether it is $1,500 or $1,000 promised by the Minister of Finance, and to date, not one individual has received any of those grants. And they have been home because malls have been shut down like all other small and medium retail businesses since the beginning of 1st of May. We are now, today is the 13th of June. 13th of June. And not one individual has received any salary grant to bring relief to this country. A lot of them are now depending on the members of parliament or anywhere or any good Samaritan who's giving out hampers to survive. That cannot be right. That cannot be right for this country, from what we have witnessed and the standard of living that we have enjoyed in this country for all these years. That cannot be right. It cannot be just another bad day we are witnessing in our country. Now, I want to ask a question about home quarantine. People who are COVID, who are positive with COVID, and they are home quarantine. And when you look at that number of individuals who are positive, COVID positive, and they are quarantined at home, it is over, Dr. Bodo, over 8,000 individuals. They have 8,000 individuals who are in their home, self-isolation because they are COVID positive. Because in our hospitals, we can only accommodate 450 plus beds. So we have over 8,000 individuals, and the numbers are there every 4 p.m. or 4:30 thereabout. When the Ministry of Health publishes their numbers, you can see the number of over 8,000 individuals that are home, COVID positive, and self-quarantine. And you have to ask yourself, the population has to ask themselves, What is the education process that is being done by the Minister of Health for these individuals who are COVID positive and home and being taken care by their family? And that is what the population has to ask. What are the protocols? Are we doing a proper education process on those individuals and their families who are COVID positive and at home? And one has to ask, if I have an individual who is COVID positive at home, I am not COVID positive at this point in time, and I would want to take care of them. Because our homes in Trinidad and Tobago are not mansions that you can really do a proper self-isolation. And you wonder and you have to ask, because you love your loved one who is home and you want to take care of them, the risk of you getting COVID is high. And what is the education process? Or what are you putting in place to assist those families? Whether it is as Dr. Bodo mentioned, that he has advised that everyone can maybe purchase a pulse oximeter. I mean, how right now, I got a gift for one and it was about $250. How many of us can afford $250 for a pulse oximeter, which can save your life, as opposed to buying food? And maybe the government of Trinidad and Tobago, instead of giving out face masks, maybe should consider giving out pulse oximeters to individuals as a start, at home, families at home taking care of COVID positive patients. Maybe as a start, they should do that. So, again, COVID, home quarantine, that's an issue. And every time you hear it, and they come and they do their press conference, nothing is said about individuals who are home, COVID positive, and how they are being taken care of. We hope the Prime Minister and the Minister, they always say, well, we hope they're doing their best, we hope they self-isolate, and so forth. But what are you doing to assist those families? So, those are some of my points I would like to add to what Dr. Bodo had said. And I want to get into a substantive issue in my portfolio, shadow portfolio as Works and Transport. On Monday last, we had a standing finance committee, where we asked questions because the government came on Wednesday in their mid-year review to ask for $3 billion additional to what they had requested in October 2020 for budget 2020-2021. They are asking for $3 billion more. And you would have thought on Wednesday, when the Minister of Finance did his mid-year review, the country, besides the debacle and the fiasco of the mass experimentation vaccination that we witnessed on Wednesday, and one has to ask, is there any linkage between that experiment on Wednesday morning by this government and the mid-year review that was presented in Parliament on Wednesday? Is there any linkages as far as public relations stunts are concerned? Because you would have thought when the Minister of Finance presented his appropriation bill of asking for over $3 billion more to you, the taxpayers, you would have thought that he would have come and given a presentation of what and how and where the spending has been doing, or what has been the performance of his government with the expenditure that he had requested back in October 2020. Now, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, in September, which our financial year ends, this government will be having another $16 billion deficit. So they had a $16 billion thereabouts last year for 2019-2020 budget. This year, at the end of September, they will have another $16 billion deficit. That is there in black and white. We are not making this up. So in 2 years, this government alone will be having a $32 billion deficit. And not a word from the business chambers, not a word from those accounting firms that always give glowing terms, glowing accolades to the government when they present a budget in October of each year. They never assess what has happened during the course of the year. And that is where the opposition always have to hold this government to account. So on Monday at the SSE, they came to ask for $294 million in works and transport, along with what the millions or billions that they would have asked in October. So what the $294 million they're asking for additional for works and transport? Out of that $294 million, 160, I want you all to listen and take my time, $160 million is for the operation expenses, $160 million for the operation expenses of the 2 fast ferries that this Prime Minister purchased in Australia, the APT James and the Bucco Ferry, the Bucco Reef, sorry. Those two ferries for the inter-isle between Trinidad and Tobago and Trinidad. The APG James started operations in March of this year, 2021, and the Bucco Reef started operation maybe a week ago. And they have come to Parliament asking for $160 million to operate, not to purchase, because that's a different head, to operate those 2 fast ferries. $160 million. When I have worked out the maths on those 2 fast ferries, and nothing is wrong, but we have to, about the Prime Minister and his government wants to purchase inter-island vessels, but you have to ask yourself, what are the times that we are in? The times that the country has been going through over the last 5 years. So the APG James and the Bucco Reef, brand new vessels, they're asking 100, and it is there in black and white. So I'm not making up these numbers, because the Minister of Works and Transport, when I asked his question, he couldn't answer me. So he said he will send it to me in writing. We got it late in Parliament on Wednesday, the response, and I'm going through it. And that is why it is critical that Standing Finance Committee, when the government says we are asking repetitive questions, if I did not ask this question, the country would not be aware what I'm going to say here today. What the Minister of Works and Transport responded in writing to me, to maintain the monthly cost to maintain the APT James, brand new vessels, and the Bucco Reef only went into service in our waters this year, 2 weeks ago, one in March, will cost together, literally, per month, $23 million to operate. $23 million to operate. When you multiply 360 by 12, it's $280 million annually to operate those 2 vessels. When I divide that per day, it's $768,000 per day to operate those 2 brand new vessels. You know, if you take a food card of $400, you know how many families monthly we can feed this country or offer the country what we are going through in this COVID-19 pandemic, and people are suffering. You literally can offer, and with $400, with your monthly operating cost of $23 million, literally 58,000 individuals, households, people in this country monthly. And one has to ask if that is value for money that this government has given the taxpayers of this country in purchasing 2 fast ferries. So every year, every year, you, the taxpayers, will be asked to vote for, literally to operate those two fast ferries, over $23 million a month. And this is in black and white. These are not my numbers. This is the numbers issued by the Minister of Works and Transport. It is there. So, for example, when I asked him to account for the $160 million broken down, he sent me a breakdown. Employees' expenses alone to operate out of that $160 million that they're asking for the AP James and the Booker Reef is literally $11 million in employee expenses. Repairs and maintenance, it is approximately over $50 million in repairs and maintenance of 2 brand new vessels. Fuel and lubricants, over $78 million. Insurance, maritime and general insurance. Of course we know you must pay insurance on the vessels. We're not disputing that. And there's a line item for that. But there's a line item called NIDCO management fees. NIDCO management fees. That NIDCO is charging the government to operate as management fees the APT James and the Booker Reef. In total, out of that $160 million, literally NIDCO is getting over $7 million in management fees. So that is why it was critical in that Standing Finance Committee on Monday that all the heads were examined properly. Because how many more like this, if I did not persist with this question and ask it in writing, we would never be aware of the cost of operating those 2 brand new ferries. So before I close, I want to ask taxpayers to be aware of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And when an independent senator this week on Friday, last Friday, asked the Minister of Finance, how are we going to pay for that how is he going to fund that $3 billion? And the leader of opposition asked it on Wednesday and she never got a response. So on Friday, the independent senator asked the same question. And the Minister of Finance said, well, you can fund that extra deficit of $3 billion by either borrowings or dipping into the HSF. And you can dip into the HSF because we are in a pandemic. You see that word pandemic? We have to be careful of how they use that word pandemic to take money out of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That is our last savings of our country. That is our last savings of our country. And the question has to be asked, are they creating, how long will it be in this pandemic? Or when will they stop using the word pandemic? Or when will we get out of this pandemic? Because all over the world, we are seeing USA, even Barbados recently, I understand last night, from promoters, that the government of Barbados is considering how to have crop over, which is their carnival, in the next month or 2. So they have been thinking forward, visionary planning of opening up the economy. We are shutting down and locking down our economy, and people are suffering. We are constantly locking down our economy. People are hoping that we'll hear something by the Prime Minister and his government when we'll see the opening of our economy. And we are no closer, because we had hope about 7 days ago in his last press conference when he talked about opening up or looking at opening the economy and having discussions with Caribbean Airlines. Well, that never happened this week. It never happened this week, because people are looking forward to hear some discussions or something from this government about these discussions that he had promised about having with Caribbean Airlines in opening back up the airline industry. And we are hoping that in 2 weeks' time, we, the opposition and the country, we are hoping that we don't witness any issues coming out of that debacle that was created by this government on Wednesday. Right? We hope we don't see, God forbid, I am praying that we do not witness any spikes in the next 2 weeks, given the fiasco that was created by this government on Wednesday. So, ladies and gentlemen, viewers out there, I said enough. And before I close, I really want to endorse what the leader of the opposition has said in her release yesterday. And I want to leave a quote here. Hundreds and thousands of people are without work, unable to provide food for their families, unable to pay bills, unable to pay their rent. A virus of poverty is also sweeping our nation, with no plan in place to resuscitate our economy. And I will add further, I am calling on the resignation of the Minister of Health, Dayal Singh, and I'm asking the Prime Minister, please go back to the post and call for a fresh mandate from the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And we are open for questions from the media, both myself and Dr. Bodo. Nothing.
Hi, good day. Well, Rachel asked me here from the news today. How are you all doing?
We can't hear
Can you
right
hear me?
now.
Are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
hi.
good.
So, for Dr. Bodo, I just want to find out, you mentioned the government isn't listening to the private sector about the vaccination rollout. Have you been hearing from the private sector about what suggestions they would like to see from the public sector make, and what suggestions you would have for how the government should handle the rollout? And for Dr. Lee, I just wanted to ask a question on A&V oil. We understand that Friday, the ruling came out that A&V did not do anything illegal, didn't have any fake oil. Can you please say what the opposition's position is on that?
So, just to be clear, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Rachel SPD with the Newsday.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for I'll take the first question. You asked about how the private sector can engage the government. Well, I mean, based on what we saw this Wednesday, obviously the government is in no position to do mass vaccination rollouts. And we did with this last weekend with the TTMA rollout. So it would appear that it would be wise for the government to engage the private sector in terms of their organization and management skills. I mean, obviously, the Prime Minister has made it clear that the government is the only one able to purchase the vaccines. But in terms of the rollout of the vaccines, this is where I think the private sector would have an important role to play in terms of offering their management and organizational skills. And I think I strongly suggest that the government take up this offer from the private sector.
Let me just add to that question. There are many talented event planners in our country. They put together the biggest show in the world, which is our carnival. Our Fed promoters, they have the talent, they understand the logistics. And I'm asking the government, work with these people in coming up with a plan. They're offering their services free of charge. They're offering their services. Don't feel you can do it alone. Do not fool the population again and feel that you know it all, because you don't. It showed up on Wednesday. So there are enough talented band leaders, logistics individuals that can help you, the government, roll out a proper vaccination plan. I didn't get your second question.
All right, so this week, A&P Oil, the ruling on A&P Oil came out, and it won its case in arbitration. The UNC has raised an issue on the Hustings claim that A&P supplied Petrotrin with fake oil, but they didn't supply the oil. It was paid, and it was based on an incomplete invoice. I just want to know if you all have any comments on that, and the the lawyer of ANV also said that the UNC owes the country an apology. Are you able to make a comment on that?
Well, the ANV matter, for what I read, that was released yesterday on social media last night, is a matter between the Petrotrin and ANV, the company. Petrotrin, as you know, is a government-owned company, so it is the government to answer, on that matter, what is happening between ANV Drilling and Petrotrin, not the opposition.
But wasn't it the opposition leader who raised the issue on the alleged fake oil that they were getting?
What the opposition leader did back in, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, was to raise a matter that came to her. And she put it out in the domain, and because it was out in the domain, Petrotrin, when they did their further audits or research, felt they wanted to take it a next step further. And that is where the whole issue of litigation transpired, or the termination of what I read of the contract between Petrotrin and AV Drilling. So all the leader of the opposition did, like we all do, all opposition members, is to bring to the fore, just like the COVID-19, that we get information and we bring it to the population. And it's really for the government of the day to take it further and be transparent with the country.
So are you saying that the UNC isn't claiming any responsibility for Petrotrin's investigation into ANV?
No, we're not claiming any responsibility in that. I mean, it is outside of our remit. I mean, we don't hire Petrotrin lawyers. We're not part of that. We're not part of that decision process.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
I think we might have covered, but before we end, I want to just add one more thing, Dr. Bodo, is a comment that was made by the Minister of Finance when he was speaking in a conference in CAF. CAF is the lending facility, and NIB. And he talked about the life expectancy has increased steadily over the last 50 years, while birth rates have declined. So we are asking the Minister of Finance to elaborate on that statement, because it does not sound, from where we sit, it does not sound very nice that you're literally talking about the elderly being a burden on NIB because they are being paid their pension. The elderly has worked for that. And if life expectancy is longer in Trinidad and Tobago, it's no one's fault. So that if we are living longer and enjoying our retirement, why deprive the population of that? Because I want to add further, I notice even this new rollout vaccination plan that they came up with, they are now saying 65 and older. No longer 60 and older, they have now changed it to 65 years and older. So we ask the Minister of Health also clarify why that change of age when it was 60 and older all the time, now we have now changed it to 65 and older. Is it because you're not going to get the amount of vaccines that you have given hope to this country? So that's it that we have here today. I know we did a good press conference. Thank you, Dr. Bodo. I think we added some clarity and to the media and the listeners out there. So again, thank you. And we wish you a safe and blessed day on Sunday. And tomorrow we are having our virtual, Monday virtual report, led off, and our featured speaker, as always, will be our opposition leader, political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. So have a great day, folks, and see us again for another press conference during the week. Thank you.